right. Shabba right. Hey, welcome to Episode 7. Night Rider Podcast. October 27, 2019. What a beautiful day. And yeah, it's not night yet, but hey, not every episode has to be in the night. Alright? Relax. Relax. It's a nice Sunday drive, you know? So hey, how's it going, everybody? Thank you for joining me. So, how's everybody been feeling? Myself, I've been feeling pretty good. To be honest with you, today was one of those, like, I woke up and I kind of just, like, went right into, like, I don't know how to say it, but, like, machine mode, I guess you could say. Some people call it, like, zombie mode, where you're just kind of out of it. You're just kind of, like, taking things as they come. And that was definitely most of my day today. But isn't that nice to do on a Sunday? You know, in the Bible, those guys in the Bible, they always talk about this stuff. In the Bible, God said that Sunday should be the Sabbath day, the day that you do not work. And according to him, it should be the only day that humans didn't work, which was kind of interesting. And I always relate it because, you know, I believe in sacred numerology, and they say that 6 is one of the devil's numbers. And if you think about it, 6 days of a 7-day week, we are supposed to work. That's pretty interesting, don't you think? Like, it's funny how that lines up. Like, why did he make it 6 days? Why did he make 6, you know, the number of the devil? I mean, why would he do that? And I think what it goes to show is there's a grand order to the whole thing. There's definitely a sort of like a spider intelligence weaving a web throughout this whole grand universe that we get to be a part of. And yeah, that's one of the interesting things to me. It's really cool to excuse me. It's really cool to go back and because I was raised Christian, thank you to my dad. I at times have hated it, actually, but looking back on it, I'm pretty happy that I was raised with Christian values. I think it's led me to have a pretty enjoyable life, that I do more good around the world than negative. So, yeah. Most countries nowadays are raised with what we call Judeo-Christian values, and I think that goes to show that, for the most part, that's the best system that I think we've got going for humanity at the moment. At this time of recording, there are certain religions that are popping up and becoming more proliferate, becoming more popular and well understood. I've always been into paganism. Of course, first of all, I should say I've studied many, many different religions, and it's actually a hobby of mine to watch videos and read sacred texts. I've read the Bhagavad Gita. I've read the Quran. I've read the Bible, obviously, and that means the King James Version, the NIV, other versions. I've read some witchcraft books. I've read ancient pagan books. I've read the only things I really don't know a lot about are actually the Islamic religions, which, like I said, I've read some of their sacred texts, but I haven't really dove deep into it. So that's something that I've been looking to do for a little while. But anyway, that's something that I think we all should do as people, is look into the different religions. I love philosophy, and really what religion is it's philosophy. Calling it religion kind of adds magic to it. It's like okay, somebody writes down some words that sound fancy and they rhyme, and they say, oh, well, you know, it's a song. Well, it sounds pretty as a song, and it's pretty cool, but if you say, oh, well, this is a magic spell, all of a sudden it's got this allure to it. It's got this sort of like energy around it now. It's got vibes, you know, it's got this characteristics that make people think a certain way about it. And I think that's part of what we do when we say religion, is it adds that little bit of allure. It adds that context to it. Whereas if you just said, oh, well, this is philosophy, it would be kind of a little bit watered down, it felt like, even though it really isn't, in my opinion. So, yeah, go ahead, study some philosophy, look at different religions. One thing, even though my dad, growing up, always wanted us to be God-fearing, Jesus-loving Christians, he always let us look into and study other religions. And I'm so happy he did that, because as a kid who didn't know much about the world but felt like I was being a bit cheated, or like life was being unfair to me, not allowing me to learn about these other religions, when I was able to learn about them, and it was kind of like, it was almost like, yeah, you should look into these other things to see what they say, and, you know, decide for yourself what's best, but always remember that Jesus is real, and Christianity, or the Protestant Christian belief system, is what's closest to what is truth. That's what I grew up being taught. And I don't necessarily believe that way anymore, but I can definitely say that out of all the religions out there that I've studied and been immersed in, I think Christianity, out of all of them, is probably the best philosophy out there for the most people. There are a lot of people out there that Christianity doesn't work well for, but even if you look at other religions or philosophies that we believe in, they're basically different versions of Christianity. So, yeah, go out there and find your flavor, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We all know what's right and wrong in our heart. Sometimes people have a harder time with that than others, and that's why I think it's important to look into religion and philosophy, but ultimately you know what you shouldn't do. So, off the religious stuff, one thing they've been doing a lot here in Arizona is they've been building this new freeway down south. In my earlier episodes, you can actually see some of the construction going on, and it's always interesting to me when they do construction, especially major construction like freeways, because growing up, when I had a Nintendo DS, I would play SimCity, and SimCity was basically you get to run your own city. And it's always interesting to me, the simulation games, because a simulation video game is like a highly, highly advanced form of technology. I don't think enough people appreciate the simulation technology in video games that we have. You know that if you're learning how to fly or to become a pilot, they actually recommend buying certain flight simulator video games for your computer or your Xbox to help you learn. I mean, that's the future if I've ever heard of it. Who would have thought back in the days when Pong was popular and what everybody thought of when you said the words video game? Who would have thought that one day it would become this? I mean, people did. There were people that did see it coming, but for the most part, nobody saw it coming like it actually has. And that's a very interesting thing about how time unfolds and how the future works. You can read certain science fiction and find out that a lot of what we have today in technology, like cell phones, the way people behave, like our culture, as far like as the way that evolved or advanced, whatever term you prefer, the way the government has become so broad and now kind of like keeps track of everybody's comings and goings, and has everybody's cell phones in some way bugged. That was stuff that was talked about in science fiction 20, 30 years before it all happened. And it's interesting how we can see certain things coming, but we don't quite get the perfect picture on it. It reminds me of a conversation me and my son had the other day. I was telling him about how some people believe they have these psychic abilities, and one of the psychic abilities that people believe they have is remote viewing. And if you've ever watched any documentaries about like the CIA or any kind of like psychic experiments that people did, the CIA conducted experiments with remote viewing, and what they tried to do was get people to sort of astral travel, or through their mind's eye, the third eye, see things that were far away. And the cool thing about it was that some of it was found to be, well, it had good results. There were certain things that the military thought they could use out of it. Now, the official final say on the experiments were that it had no military applications. So they said that while it did have some use, it wasn't reliable or effective enough to continue or make something that the military could actually have use for. But it's interesting to see that they actually did do experiments with it. And from the experiments I've seen done with the military and without the military, probably the best thing I could tell you to check out is Joe Rogan had this show called Joe Rogan Questions Everything on the Sci-Fi Channel for a while, and on it he had these people do some remote viewing, and they tried to, through Joe Rogan and another friend of his eyes, see stuff that they were looking at hundreds of miles away from an underground base that these remote viewers had. And they actually drew some pictures that did kind of seem like perhaps they did have some psychic ability that allowed them to see through other people's mind's eye enough to paint or draw a picture of what they had been looking at the moment, or get close to it. So it's kind of interesting the way it's almost like it's weird how, like, God through time, we see how he works. And I don't mean like directly, but it's like if you've ever seen a marble sculpture been worked on, it starts off as this huge chunk, this bulky block that doesn't look beautiful. I mean, it looks beautiful as far as, like, I guess the fact that it's like a huge piece of the earth, but it's got no, like, artistic value to it. It's got no human touch, no real, like I said, artistic value, I guess is the real word I'm looking for. But you watch a sculptor chip away at it little by little at a time, and eventually it's this immaculate, super detailed, beautiful work of art. God through time works in that way, and it kind of says something about humanity that through these maybe underdeveloped or forgotten abilities, we could perhaps get a little bit of that God sight to see what the future holds. But even if we can get a real good hold of it, perhaps we just don't quite have what it takes to really get that God sight on lock or specific enough. Kind of interesting. So anyway, let's end this episode, even though we've got still a little bit left. Let's end it with something light. One thing I've been seeing a lot of is climate change stuff, and unlike a lot of my other episodes or stuff you might hear about climate change, I'm not going to sit here and argue the science or not. If you want to know what I think about it, I'm sure I'll talk about it in a later podcast episode. But the thing I think I would like to say most about climate change is, whether it's real or not, it has got humans more conscious of how we're affecting the environment around us. And I think that's just a cool thing generally. If you've ever seen a dysfunctional family, or you've seen a dysfunctional relationship, a lot of times when the other person, or one of the two people, or both people even, are made aware of the bad things they're doing, they oftentimes will catch themselves and try to correct those mistakes. Now, there's times where we know our flaws and we have to live with them, so no matter how aware we are of them, we may repeat and continue these mistakes. But it's good that being made aware is kind of slowly improving the way we go about our existence. Say what you will about climate change, and you might not believe in it at all, but either way, there's nothing cool about dumping toxic chemicals in a lake or anywhere, really. I mean, I understand that we all as humanity now practically pile up trash. They say the average American piles up, I forget what it is. I can't even say the exact statistic, but it's some crazy amount of trash per year. And that's just, while I understand it's a necessary evil because we're already where we are, and like I said, we are taking steps to reduce that and change our evil ways, it's pretty sad that we let it get to that point. So kudos and credit to humanity for trying to be better about it. I don't really like the overblown statistics and scary exaggerations that we sometimes get in the media because of climate change. And perhaps the scientists themselves are confused because while we've come this far and we're this advanced and have the technological equipment we have, we still don't understand so much about the world around us and the way it works. We have a very, very minuscule understanding of the way the world and the environment works at large. So as time goes on, we'll know more, and whether it turns out we were totally wrong about climate change or halfway wrong, we could at least say that when we realized there were some bad things going on, we stopped, took a second, and said, hey, maybe we should think about the way we're doing this and try to make it a little better, not just for ourselves at some point in the future, but also for the other living and non-living things around us. Kind of a godly little trait that humanity expressed through that. And not just through climate change, by the way. If you look at the way our culture has evolved over time, we're just becoming better and better. As time goes on, we clean up our act, and it's hard sometimes to admit when you've done something wrong, and it's really hard to try and go back to repent on those things, because once you've started the momentum a certain way, shifting back against it is a task that should not be underappreciated if done correctly. So pat yourself on the back for all the things that you've come along with and tried to change and do better, and pat yourself on the other side of your back for accepting your flaws and traits, because Lord knows we all got them. I deal with them, you deal with them, we deal with them together, and that's what makes it all the more fun while we're here on this life. None of us are going to last forever, even if these singularity people try to get everything together that they're trying to plan about making our consciousness go into computers and having certain people live forever. It's not really going to be who you were meant to be naturally as a human. So appreciate this natural human life that we were given, not by other, well, I mean, we were given it by other humans, but more by God and nature, the way it was supposed to be laid down, or at least the way it's been done for a very long time. Not to knock on the artificial ways that we've developed, and I'm certainly not saying we should stop them or hate on them as long as they're not doing anything wrong or hurting humanity as a whole, but I think we should take some time and appreciate the ways of the past and realize that they weren't so bad. Anyway, catch you later. Thanks for joining me. Praying over me, but I just want to party. Nobody just want to party.